Hey everybody, welcome to Unfiltered and Intentional. Once again, matter of fact, before I even start, let me just take this microphone off.
Unmute. Okay.
There you go. The old school way. We're taking off the mics, the lighting, everything. As usual, I think I start off saying I'm so happy for you guys to be on air, and then like 5 minutes before I start the show, all my technology just breaks down. I have to do a revamping of my life, myself, and everything else. But we have another important subject today. But before I even talk about any of that, let's talk to Ty. Go ahead, Ty.
Hello, everyone. We always get it together, Kia. We always get it together. It's if we don't have glitches, that means the show is not going to be a great show. So we have great shows. Yeah. Anywho, y'all know what time it is. Welcome, all new subscribers and viewers and our ones that are faithful to us and come back every Sunday to watch us, and our pre-recorded ones that we put out too. So, quick little routine. If you are part of the Facebook group and you're viewing this on Facebook and you have not yet made it to YouTube, you know what to do. Go over to the YouTube icon, type in Unfiltered and Intentional, press the like, subscribe, share, and alert so you know when we're going live. And if you're on YouTube and you're on Facebook too, and you haven't subscribed to our Facebook group, make your way over there. Show some love. We love you guys.
Hey, thank you, Ty. So we want to say that we hope Specs is not on. We hope Specs feels better. He doesn't feel good, so we hope you feel better. Sending you much love. But this is an important show, and the reason why we're having this show is because we want to talk about how to handle, how to prepare if possible in an active shooting scenario. With that being said, Liz, thank you for also being a co-host and Ty, but we have a special guest. This special guest that we have here, let me put the banner here, is retired OPD Kevlon Kirkpatrick. Thank you for serving our community and doing a lot that we couldn't do. Because even though I served in the military, I could not do that every single day, hitting those streets the way police officers do. I think that you hear about it sometimes in certain TV programs, but you don't hear about it enough. We really do support our police, and we definitely want to make sure that they're here to protect us, and they're taking down crime, because I know I couldn't do it the way you guys do it. So hats off to you.
Thank you.
Some family that's serving as well, the communities. So thank you for them as well. But just to do a little small bio, Mr. Kirkpatrick has over 23 years of experience working as a law enforcement officer, is currently a director at large with the Florida Design Out Crime Association, and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from the College of Staten Island. So you're from New York, if I'm assuming correctly?
Yes, I was born in Harlem, raised in the Bronx, and then moved to Staten Island, where I went to middle school, high school, and college.
All right. But you're down here in Florida, correct?
I love Florida. Yes, I've been in Florida since 1995, and I don't plan on leaving. I love Florida.
No, I know. But just
love the weather. You can't shovel the sun, so I'm good with that.
Yeah, right. Well, just jumping into it, I thought the show needed to happen because we're already in the beginning of April. So, and first off, happy Easter to anybody who celebrates Easter. But since this time frame has started, these couple of months, there have been some mass shootings, and it seems like it's an everyday thing. It also seems that maybe we've been desensitized, if I want to say, just because you hear about it. It used to be a kind of a national outcry, moment of silence, and then it's like, now on to the next subject. We don't even have those moments anymore. Why do you think there's an uptick in mass shootings?
I think that we have to understand that people don't handle stress well. So, for example, we're not really taught and trained to deal with challenges. Resilience is one of the keys to life, I think. And I think when I met you several years ago, I talked about, to my humble opinion, the two keys to life. Aptitude is one's capacity to learn, and fortitude is one's willingness and ability to fight through whatever challenges that they face, i.e. resilience. So resilience, dealing with challenges that we face, whether it be financial, a pandemic, or relationship wise, or just everyday stressors. We don't deal with that well. And now we have access to information. We have access to the internet. We have the pandemic. We have lots of challenges pertaining to the media, providing us with information pertaining to voting and politics and every other thing. And people are just not handling things well. So this is what, day 94 in 2021. And we've had already have had 122 mass shootings. And just to be clear, a mass shooting is when 4 or more people are injured and or killed in one incident. That's the definition of a mass shooting. So the definition of an active shooter is an individual or individuals actively engaged in attempting to or taking lives in a confined or populated area.
Wow. And thank you for that definition, because a lot of times these things can be misconstrued. And, you know, to be honest with you, you're like, hey, on the block on the south side, there's always a mass shooting, you know, but, you know, that's a whole nother scenario there. But it, like I said, it seems like there's something happening every day. And I want to get into the crux of, you know, when you heard about it on the news, you know, there was a shooting in Atlanta and these people are at massage parlors. You think to yourself, what's the odds of someone coming in a massage parlor and hurting me? You know, I'm here for relaxation, you know. A supermarket. I remember there was a mass shooting in Texas. And in Texas, you know, it was a Walmart, matter of fact, and a lot of people got hurt there. I want to say it was like maybe a year or two ago, 2 years, around that time frame, if I'm not mistaken. But when you go grocery shopping, you would never expect that, hey, I'm coming to buy some orange juice, and now all of a sudden I'm running for my life. Something as so simplistic as that, what do you do? Because I'm on the show a lot of times. I have other ones that are on the show and we're like, hey, we're preppers. And, you know, hey, we know we're trained. We know how to shoot a weapon. We know how to do these certain things. But I'm going to be honest with you. I don't carry a weapon to the grocery store buying my orange juice. You know, I'm in Florida with my flip-flops and some shades on, you know, and, you know, a do-rag of some sort. You know, I'm at the local store. What do people do? You're supposed to come locked in arm. What should you do if you're at this, you know, a regular supermarket?
Well, I have this famous phrase. The body can rarely go where the mind has never traveled. So if you're not planning and preparing and going over the what if with your loved ones and with yourself, when a tragedy strikes or when something challenging, a stressor comes on, you're not really going to be able to deal with it too well. So we live in a country where a lot of people adhere to their Second Amendment right, and that's fine. But the average person is not always going to have access to that weapon. So learning how to pay attention to things that you normally don't pay attention to. Unfortunately, a lot of people walk around in a bubble. So being aware and going over the what if with your family members, because it's fine to say, I'm going to fight that individual, right? And the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has a fantastic website and lots of tutorials that are easy to read and straight to the point. Department of Homeland Security, one can just go on to their website and download the information and or read it. So when I do my presentations, I'm sharing their information. So they talk about running, hiding, fighting. Some businesses have changed it to avoid, deny, defend, or secure, preserve, fight. Whatever you want to come up with is fine. So running out of the way, getting into it, or running toward a safe place. Unfortunately, the average person doesn't know the difference between north, south, east, west. So running, they could just be running aimlessly somewhere and not really pay attention to their surroundings. So evacuate whether other people agree with you or not. And that's very hard for most people to do. Most people want to save everyone in their immediate surroundings. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily going to be possible because someone may fight you off because they're caught up in the acute stress response. We call it fight or flight, right? So that's the body's physiological response to a threat or to fear. So you're going to see people in a an active shooter scenario or mass shooting scenario, they're going to go through the physiological changes, such as rapid heart rate and or breathing, pale or flushed skin, dilated pupils, and trembling. That's what's going to take place for the most part. So they're going to fight, take flight, or they're going to freeze. But if you run, where are you going to run? And when you get to somewhere safe, it's incumbent upon you to then pick up the phone and call 911, right? So if you're going to hide, where are you going to hide? Silencing our cell phones. We don't normally do things like that too well. Evacuation, completely evacuating a building and or supermarket if it's at all possible. But a lot of times like I said, we get caught in the fight or flight. So we freeze. Locking the doors or finding an area in which you can run in and hide in a particular closet. But the downside to that is you may limit your access to escaping. So remaining quiet, most of us cannot remain quiet when we're trembling and when our kids are crying or when you're in the room with some person that is making noise and or just as scared as you are. And then next thing you know, you're crying out loud. So these little things like trying not to trap yourself, using improvised weapons, silencing your cell phone, understanding where you are. You may have to crawl if need be. And then if you can get to your vehicle, can you start your vehicle quickly? We don't do these things fast. Right. We normally take our time to turn on our cell phone. We normally take our time to get into our vehicles. We normally take our time to walk to and from our car. And some of us aren't dressed appropriately, meaning that you're wearing high heel shoes. Are you likely to just kick those bad boys off after you spent $120 on each shoe? You're probably not going
what does money mean? What $120 shoe? Where?
We have to be cognizant and going over the what if with our family members and with ourselves, but doing it in a way which is not going to cause us too much stress. Right? We have to think about that. We can become traumatized by learning of and talking about violence or violent things. We talk about run, hide, or fight. Fighting is one of the aspects of what DHS says you can do, but they're really good at explaining how that is the last resort, and the average person is not violent. Violence is not innate. It's not a natural thing for people to do. People being mean, that's one thing, but violence is not normally something that most people are good at. A lot of people embellish, especially men, when we're amongst, no women in the room, or if women are in the room, we say, I wish somebody would come in here. No, we don't. We don't wish that. Right? It sounds good to say that, but most of us. And fighting doesn't necessarily mean you're squaring off with someone with a weapon. It could be a firearm, could be a knife, could be a baseball bat, an axe, a fork. It's grabbing weapons that are available to us, like a cell phone, a water bottle, a laptop, a notebook, a chair, and throwing it in the direction of the person wishing to do us or someone else harm, and then getting out of harm's way. That's fighting to me. Fighting, running away. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, when you was naming those things, to tell the audience, please don't be a Macgyver putting bubble gum together and thinking that you're putting some tools together, knowing that he about to kill you. Don't do that. I know he's naming and labeling a lot of items right now. Do not be the Black Macgyver. Please don't.
There are some people who are highly capable, but
you're trained.
That's
most
probably
of us
not
are.
something you should do.
Yeah.
And then we also have to keep in mind, when you pull out your weapon, where are you? And do you now become the person that every other witness there says he or she has that weapon? And I'm not saying don't protect yourself, but we have to be very cognizant of where we are, what we're wearing, and the dynamics and the totality of each and every situation. Wow. If we decide to defend ourselves or defend our family members, or just attack what is threatening us, we must be 100% committed to stopping that threat. And unfortunately, most people are not violent, so therefore it may not work. It may work if all 500 people in the supermarket attack the person that's attacking or trying to hurt them, but normally that does not happen. So there is no one-stop shop. It's a lots of options to consider, and it's incumbent upon us to talk about these things. This way, when we're going through some options in our mind's eye in the face of a challenge, if one doesn't work, we're quickly deviating and going toward another one rather than freezing and panicking and trembling, because all of that is natural.
Do you think the culture has changed in regards to see something, say something? Because I know growing up, it's like, don't be that snitch, like, well, why that man, got that big duffel bag, and we're sitting here in the library. Why do you need a whole luggage suitcase, And so we would keep that to ourselves. But now these things are coming so often. Do you think that we're in this mindset as a society where we're like, where are you going? Like, do you think this has changed, that mentality?
Yes.
Okay.
I definitely think it has changed. See something, say something is fantastic, but I'd like to take it to another step, another level. See something, say something, and make a call, make a difference. Because say something and just mean you tell your friend. I want you to call the police and make a call, make a difference. Don't just tell someone something. Tell those that can help stop this threat. I'm grateful that we live in a country that we have an outstanding military and we have outstanding police departments that are ready and willing and prepared and trained to handle challenges such as this. Because as a society, if we were made aware of all of the threats and active shooting incidents and mass shooting incidents that are derailed prior to them going into action or going into play, we would be traumatized. I guarantee you there are hundreds a year that are derailed and stopped before anyone gets hurt. So snitches get stitches. Well, I'd rather get stitches because they can help heal in about 2 weeks rather than go to jail for 30 years. I'm just saying. I'm telling. If you do a crime around me, I'm telling. So,
so what should we be looking like? What should we be looking out for when trying to prepare? Because I know each situation might be different. Again, we had the shooting out. What was it? The Mandalay in Vegas. They were at an actual concert.
At a concert.
58, 59 people got hurt or died or something like that. And another very sad event. But at one time when I thought about an active shooter, the visual in my head was like the person with the trench coat and the glasses, and it's not like that. It's not like that. So what should we be aware of?
Not at all. We should be aware of, and depending upon where we are, like at work, people that have changes in hygiene, people that now, instead of going to work and coming to work on time, they're not doing that. People that have, they go from never having money problems or challenges with finances to now being in dire straits and begging for money or asking to borrow money. People that are obviously using drugs and or alcohol, and that's not something that you saw them doing. People that are marginalized, people that feel that that the world is against them. They're going through some not only financial, but some domestic challenges at home with their children or with their significant other. They're engaging in fascinating about incidents that have taken place. They're starting to brag and talk about and be interested in all types of weapons when they never did this before. That's very important that I say that. These people have made a complete and utter 360. And they're dressing different, they smell different, they talk different, they walk different. Their eyes they're blinking a lot. They're not focusing on anything. They're having psychotic episodes. They're engaging in saying that they identify with individuals that have committed horrible, violent acts. These are all things that we need to pay attention to.
Let me just say that it's funny.
I have a feeling I know who that is.
That's damn near everyone now. And it's funny that you said that because I know for me, I get the look in and I'll be like, why are you scratching your head twice? Thing in there, you couldn't get that good itch. You got to go back in there. See, I would think everybody's about to cut up. Why you got that outfit on and it's so hot? Ready to pick up this phone? You gonna thinking, looking out the mirror in the window, and be like,
well, those are blatantly obvious. Like in the situation that took place at the hotel in Vegas, he was wheeling his arsenal in on one of the hotel carts, or several of the hotel carts. And since he was a quote unquote high roller and had a lot of money and stayed in 2 to 3 penthouses at one time. And I don't know how one person can be in several different places at one time. They failed to check him, if you will, or question him and challenge him, which when in fact they should have. And businesses should, management should, ownership should encourage their employees to take stands on that and challenge people, and obviously in a respectful way. But we're all in this together. No one person is going to save the day for the most part. We all have to do our part, and businesses definitely need to get threat assessments and or crime prevention, do environmental design assessments done at their property. I think we all need to take a step back, and especially those of us that are pastors at churches or priests or imams or rabbis and managers of businesses and or buildings, and look at an onion. You think of security and safety as an onion. We protect the property, we protect the parking lot, we protect the building, we protect the assets, and then we protect the image. If you think about safety and security of a facility in terms of an onion, protect the property, the parking lot, the building, the assets, the image, then you can address the needs as needed, if you will. And you do that at least once a year, because things change and crime changes. So locked doors should remain locked. Access to certain areas within and outside of your building should be paid attention to. And if someone doesn't need to have access to cameras or safe, then they don't need to have access to a camera or safe. Reporting bullying. What are you doing for workplace violence? Do you have an emergency operations plan? And every time someone logs onto their computer at work, are they seeing a question that was generated through a survey monkey, if you will, pertaining to their active shooter or emergency operations plan? Because if you have an emergency operations plan and no one in your company knows about the emergency operations plan and no one signed off on it, then you don't have an emergency operations plan.
Wow.
Right. It's just something written somewhere that no one knows about and is never read or seen or anything.
Right. And then when lawsuits take place, I've testified in 3 negligent security lawsuits, and it was horrible. I felt really bad for the family that was suing the entity. And I felt bad for the entity because they got caught up in just the business of operating their business. They weren't bad people. They just didn't have time to take the time to go over the things I'm talking about. And annual training is a must. Annual training is 100% a must. And dealing with workplace violence and bullying, because bullying takes place just as often in the adult world as it does in the world of school and children. It's just that we as adults call it a rite of passage instead of something that is wrong. Because if you're making fun of me and I don't find it to be funny, it's not funny.
Right.
Go ahead, Liz.
Now, speaking of children, it's one thing for us to talk about running for the nearest exit and all of that. How would you suggest speaking to kids about it, without scaring the bejesus out of them? But when you look at Sandy Hook, for example, there's just no way that 10 years ago we could have foreseen this. But we have fire drills, we have tornado drills. They do have active shooter drills, and especially in elementary school, they don't really explain to them what's happening. How should we talk to our kids about that? And what would be good advice to give to an elementary school, junior high school, or high school student?
Great question. Sandy Hook could have been much worse than it was, but one of the things that school did, if you listen to, and I happened to pay attention to the comments from the teachers and staff, and they talked about how they went over their active shooter or emergency operations plan so frequently, it was like second nature. And what they did was they made games or light of their emergency operations plan with their children. Every child is 100% different from the other child, even if they're siblings or related. So it's incumbent upon us as parents to go over, use terms that are not going to traumatize them. And only we know that when we're dealing with our own children, but making sure that we explain to them, this is just in case, this probably will never happen. But if it does happen, for example, when I was a child getting on trains in New York City with my mother, if you've ever been in New York City, maybe not now because of the pandemic, but back when I was a child, it was so crowded that you would get separated from your parent. So depending upon which direction we would go, my mother would say, get on the train. If we get it separated, get on the train and get off the next stop. And I got off the next stop. And my mother intentionally did it one time. And I got off the next stop and happened to be 59th Street by Bloomingdale's, and she wound up buying me the suit I wanted because I had paid attention to her. So
You
she
know
made,
where that's at. We're from
so she made it fun, and she did that because we had been in the train system when a fight broke out, and when someone threw down their briefcase because they got pushed and the briefcase slipped from their hands and it actually hit the floor, it sounded like a gun. And she said that'll never happen again, because I was horrified, but she said things like that can happen. And she explained it to me to the best of her ability. Yes, I was still a little bit scared, but she said she still believes and believed at that time in resilience, understanding and having and helping me adapt to whatever challenges and changes took place in my life. You have to teach your kids that, because that's the world we live in. And again, I have a goddaughter that's 13, and she and I had a conversation about pre-pandemic when they were having some drills with active shooter, and it was traumatizing her. So I stepped in and explained to her the do's and don'ts and the whys that her teacher was doing it. He had the best intentions possible, but he was not explaining it. He was explaining it in a blanket way, which, to his credit, he really didn't have any training in that. And he was doing his best, but he was traumatizing several of the students in the class. So I spoke with her mother, and she brought it to his attention, but I had to step in and provide her with what this happens when X, Y, and Z happens. You may want to stop, drop, and roll like in a fire, stop, drop, and crawl. Or depending upon where you are, depending upon the dynamics of the situation, but understanding where you are. What is the address for where you are? When you walk into a restaurant, are you paying attention to where the door is and where the exits are, where the restrooms are, where the kitchen is? When you walk into a major department store like a Walmart or a Publix, where are the exits? Where are places that you can hide in that particular facility or building if need be? These are things you need to talk about with your children, because the worst time to talk about these incidents is when they're happening. If someone comes up to your car when you're walking from the grocery store to your car and challenges you, and you have two children there, what are you going to do? It's easy to say, well, I'm going to fight. Well, you might. Not everyone's going to do that. Some people are going to turn toward their children. Or your children train.
Let me tell you what I'm going to do. I swear to God, you be like, I know you retired OPD, but she getting locked up already. Because, you got to use that New York voice. First of all, you got to give me 50 feet back up. And you got to give them with the voice, too, because those are my baby. Okay, that's a whole other thing.
But don't forget, when in situations like that, when we're walking from a department store, a lot of department stores ask if you would need help or you want some assistance to your car. And we, even myself, kind of blow them off. Why would we do that when there's safety in numbers? Especially when you're not alone. When you have children or an elderly person or a person that's physically challenged, why not have another person walk with you? Because unfortunately, we all do this. We do that. Not because we're mean people, it's because the creation and implementation of technology is just like using drugs. I mean, we're addicted to these things. So we're not paying attention to our surroundings. You hear victims say often, he or she came out of nowhere. No, they didn't. They were watching you from the get-go.
Right.
You just were not paying attention.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's incumbent upon us sometimes to put those things down and to pay attention, because
take
as my mother says,
out of our ears. We're walking around with earphones that you don't know what's going on. You don't. We become so distracted.
Not me.
Yes.
I mean, you're leaving the shopping center. You got two little ones, so now you might have bags. The grocery cart. This one's acting up. You're looking down.
Let me tell you something real quick. I was at the Florida Mall, and part of the Florida Mall is Crayola, type of an attraction center or whatever, where the kids can play and stuff. And my little one was like around 2 at the time, still got the pull-up thing happening, whatever. And I don't really do public bathrooms like that because I got OCD. But I'm over here like changing her without changing her, like real quick. So my oldest daughter is standing on the side. And I'll never forget it. We hear pop, pop, pop. And a little boy comes running, and he was like, run. And then a security guard lifts up 2 little kids, and he has them like he's ready. And a crowd of people running my way. Let me tell you what I did. My daughter was half attached to her stroller. Her pants was down to her ankles. I damn near choked my daughter by the throat. When I tell you, I was pushing people out the way, and my daughter was like, "Wait about my bag. Fuck your bags." We was running. And
When
then I
was
had to
this?
and just drive. It had to be like maybe about. It wasn't gunshots. They thought it was, but I want to say about. I was still working at the other job, so I want to say maybe about 2 years ago. There was a big thing at
I remember that.
Florida
Yes.
Mall. And yeah,
So there
and the
was
first
a-
out the
there was a
building was
lady-
the first
Go ahead,
one
yeah.
out the store was me. And then I couldn't. It's not just you just run away. I'm in my car driving away because what happens is a bomb. You're not blowing me to pieces.
Right, which is a
Driving
lot of
past the
things.
woman, she was like, I left my kids. The devil is a lie. Won't catch me.
So there was a lady there that had sat through one of my presentations on this, and she's probably in her late 60s, and she had reached out to me and to thank me that because she stopped, dropped, and then went right toward the exit, leaving her purse and everything else behind because she and her 6-year-old granddaughter were separated. But she had gone over what her granddaughter should do in a challenging time such as this, and her granddaughter was waiting by the door in a fetal position looking for her grandmother when her grandmother crawled up to her and they got outside.
Wow.
And she was describing this incident to me, and she was crying and I was crying and we were hugging each other, and our husband was thank you. Let me buy you lunch. And I said, bet. But it was just one of those situations where she just took a little bit of what I was asking her to consider and that group to consider, and she went with it. And thankfully it wasn't a weapon or anything. I don't know what it was, but I think it was boys playing or something like that. Mm-hmm. Or it could have been a distraction for a robbery.
It was a fight that broke out in Macy's. And I guess they were on the top floor in some chairs or something. But of course, the noise echoes. And then when you have somebody just mentioned that stampede effect,
right.
You got everybody running. You will not stampede me. No, sir. I mean, I'm so sorry because my daughter, being 2, was very bruised. And they might have thought I was like hurting her because I snatched her and the stroller. It was like half hanging from her ankle. We was dragging each other. I don't know. But you're not catching me.
Keep in mind, though, that these incidents normally last tops about 12 minutes. That's a long time. And law enforcement's response is usually within the first 4 minutes. But again, that's still a long time. And law enforcement is trained to stop the threat. It's imperative that we understand what to do when law enforcement arrives at the scene, keeping our hands visible and our fingers separated because
they don't know.
They're stopping the threat. And most people are not very good witnesses. Why? Because most people are not trained and most people are traumatized. Like I said, the acute stress response, fight or flight took place. You develop tunnel vision. Your pupils become dilated. You're trembling. You're not really paying attention to things. And when you describe something in challenges like that, you're describing your emotions and not actually what took place. Right. So law enforcement doesn't know who you are. So again, keeping items kind of away from your body, like not grabbing your purse because we don't know what's in the purse, or they don't know what's in the purse. They don't want you grabbing onto them. They want you doing exactly what they ask you to do, moving in an orderly fashion. Most likely everyone's going to walk out like this or walk out holding the shoulders in front of you and usually in a uniformed way. They may be armed with rifles and or shotguns, meaning the officers. The uniforms may vary depending upon the officers that are there, but they're normally always going to have some type of insignia. It's going to say deputy sheriff, FBI, DEA, police, or SWAT, or some type of insignia on their person that lets you know who they are. Obviously, they're usually going to have radios and helmets and things like that, but they're going to be yelling commands, and they may even spray some people. They're probably going to push people down and walk past people that are injured if the bad guy or bad woman is still trying to hurt people, because they have to stop the threat. That sounds really bad, but their job is to stop the threat. So they're going to move in a way in which is very tactical, very methodical, but very direct. Now, the second or third wave of officers and deputies and law enforcement coming into your facility or in an area, they're going to be the ones, along with medical staff, that are going to be getting people out of that area and attending to people and triaging people that are wounded. That's their job. The initial officers going into into a situation like that brave officer that responded in Denver or Boulder, Colorado, I believe recently, the one that went in by himself and unfortunately lost his life trying to help people. But that's what officers do. They're going to stop the threat. And it doesn't sound good, but their job is to stop the threat. Now, if it becomes a barricaded gunman or barricaded individual, if the individual, the bad guy or bad woman, is not hurting people in that room, then that becomes a hurry up and wait situation for SWAT or the emergency response team.
Gotcha. Let's go to
and
sorry about that. It says a soldier was shot by a cop as he was helping to get people out. He was armed, concealed carry, and was helping evacuate the mall and was killed almost immediately. So it definitely coincides with what you're saying. You know, a lot of times in these frantic situations, the mission of that police officer or whoever that officer is to stop that threat. And if we don't know, you know, what's going on, you may also get, you know, hurt in that process. I actually did a active shooter drill with Altamont PD, and being there in that type of scenario, and it's a drill, but they took over the school. You know, this is on a day off, of course, and they had the actors set up, the smoke, the fire, the sirens, the whole thing was there. And it was definitely surreal, because if you're like, help me, please, and you're walking towards that police officer, they don't know who you are. You could be one of the people trying to, you know, act like you are an injured individual, and they will push you to the side. And you're like, well, what are you doing here? You know, but at the end of the day, they have one mission, and that is to eliminate the threat. I wanted to speak about, you mentioned earlier about challenging ourselves, especially at work. I remember, and this has to do with that 9/11 bombing, when those individuals were training and learning how to fly, when the instructor asking, well, you want to learn how to land? They said that's not needed. I mean, you think to yourself, as an instructor, if I'm teaching you how to go up in the sky,
Right.
why do I not need to teach you how to land? And at these days, it's interesting. Do you think it's because we're just kind of so into what we're doing, we're not challenging ourselves? I mean, because it should be common sense, right?
Right. And if common sense were common, we wouldn't be where we are as a world. Common sense is not common. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but people just are so caught up in themselves and what they're doing and multitasking. You know, multitasking by definition means you're not giving 100% attention to anything that you're doing. That's what multitasking actually means. It's not a badge of honor and courageous to multitask, because actually you're not paying attention to someone or something. So we think of that sometimes as a good thing. That's actually not a very good thing. You know, we need to become active listeners, right? A lot of us are not active listeners. A lot of us are combative. Like we listen and conversate to engage and debate and insult, right? We're passive. See, there's three types of listeners. There's the passive one, there's the active, and there's the controlling. So the passive one, hearing but not really listening. Active is attending, reflecting, and asking. Controlling is deflecting, hijacking, and competing. Which one are we? You follow what I'm saying? So we do that. So as it pertains to this world that we're living in, especially information pertaining to this, a lot of people, especially alpha males and alpha females, will deflect running, hiding, and fighting because they're alphas. I'm not going to run. So I will use the term move, avoid, deflect. You don't have to run. You can move though, right? So in our training, my former training, we never talked about running. We talked about moving. So knowing your audience and being humble enough to be humble to learn. Once you stop learning, life is a moot point, and knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. If I know how to fix a car and I never fix a car, that's not powerful.
Right.
So if I know how to help people, I should help people. And I always use the term options to consider, because these are just options. Obviously, depending upon the totality of the circumstances you're dealing with, you're going to have to make the best decision possible. And being afraid is a human thing. It is not being a coward. It is a human thing. And if you choose to do nothing, that is your right, and you're able to do that. And we should not demonize people for being afraid. Officers that are responding to things like this are afraid. They're just acting on their fear. It's very different. They're training often, actually more than often, to deal with this. So they're going through the motions and they're fighting their fear. They've built up a lot of resilience, like the word I used in the beginning. And for the most part, they have a lot of internal fortitude. That's why they choose the job that they chose, and they're responding the way they're responding, not because they're better. It's because their mindset pertaining to that particular type of incident is completely different than the average person. Right. So those are just things to help people. And our goal is to help people. And if someone is going through a challenging time, like an argument in the supermarket, let's deflect. Let's step in and interject and to the person that you feel that you can connect with and say, hey, it's not worth it. You can have my spot on the line. Because we don't need to be doing that. Violence is not the answer.
Go ahead.
So I have a question that it may seem ridiculous, but heaven forbid any of us is ever in that situation. So you turn on the news, or somebody says turn on the news, and there's something happening at the mall that your kid is at, your teenager is at, or at their school, or anything. I think that any mother anywhere is getting to that school and getting to that mall. I don't know if that's what do you do? Like, I don't even know how to ask. I mean, because unfortunately,
that's not a stupid question. That's a fantastic question.
Good.
Because here's the challenge. It's incumbent upon these schools, and I would say almost 99.9% of them, at least in the state of Florida. I can't speak for other states, but I could talk to you about, the state of Florida, have an emergency operations plan. They also have staging areas. So what happens when a tragic incident takes place? Where are these students staging? Where are the teachers staging? And where do the parents stage? And where does the media stage? You follow what I'm saying? Because there is a specific area that you will be told to go, designated for parents and the guardians of children. And information will be funneled to you there, just like with the media. The media, if you don't give the media a designated area to go to, they're going to walk through the scene with the microphone. Not because they're bad, because their job is their job. The same thing, law enforcement is going to stage wherever they want in reference to the comm center. But in reference to students are going to be gathered, and teachers are going to be gathered in a particular area so they can start taking a head count and notifying the guardians of. So that going to the scene, I would at least go in close proximity to it. You're not going to be able to go to the scene, but you're going to be able to be a couple of blocks away, and you'll be able to reach out to an officer at the perimeter. As long as you're not approaching them in some type of challenging way, just say, hey, look, my name is such and such. I'm the daughter, I'm the mother of so-and-so. His or her name is, the date of birth is, and here's a picture of him. I just need to know where we're staging so I can wait for he or she to be brought to my area.
At those times,
that's a great question.
And piggybacking off the question she asked, in those times, are there, because of course, if these things are happening, let's just say the incident took place at 11 a.m., you get there 11:10, or 11:05. If you ran through every light or whatever the case may be, you're going to have to ticket me later. But with that being said, are there, in that staging, are there counselors there or some type of anybody to kind of console? Because of course you already know, we know now, common sense would be for us, we go to the officer, we go to whoever the representative is, they don't have that information right now. We're dealing with something, we're looking through crime scenes, we're trying to find out this and that. So if you get there at 11:10, you may not even find out about your loved one until 5 p.m. Yep. So the whole time you done pissed on yourself, you done smoked every cigarette in the world, even if you're not a smoker. Are there counselors there kind of like, hey, it's going to be okay? Or is it just you're on your own?
I would say to you that is probably something to bring up at a PTA with your school board, because that is a fantastic idea. So I would say certain companies and certain schools, maybe colleges have that because of finances. And schools normally don't have an abundance of therapists anyway. They may have one or two. In an incident like that, you're going to need probably 10 or even 20 because of the numbers of guardians that are going to come, because two guardians of one child may come at different times and they're completely and emotionally distraught, and one counselor is not going to deal with both of them because he or she may not know that they're both there, because cell phone calls are going to be blocked and or backed up because over the overwhelming number of people using that particular cell tower. So that's a fantastic thing to bring up at a school board meeting and or to bring up at a city or county council meeting, because that is fantastic. That's a great idea.
Before we go to the comments, I just want to say, make sure that if, and God forbid, you're in that situation where you have to go see a loved one in these situations, make sure that, you have somebody with you, if possible, to kind of console you, because even if there's not a counselor there, your emotions are going to flare up because your loved one is your loved one. And I know right now, sitting here, I'd be damned if somebody tell me to sit and wait. I want to know where my baby is now. And you're like, wait a second, I just told you we don't have that information. So you'll end up getting locked up yourself, and I don't even know what, you're making the situation worse. KP, I would be locked up. I'm telling you right now, I would be.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, but we have to take a step back and take a deep breath, because we have to say, is what we're doing, is what we're bringing to this scenario helpful?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because if you lose it or I lose it, and then everybody loses it, and now these officers and or law enforcement cannot do their job addressing the threat, we're doing our family members a disservice. And I get what you're saying, because that is natural. But that's why I always talk about resilience. We have to mentally go to these places, because if we don't, when it's physically time to do so, we're going to be all over the place.
You're right. Ty, you want to go to the comments real quick?
Yeah, so we'll start with okay, here we go.
Yeah,
we did that. Okay. Situational awareness, threat assessment, and violence of action. This speaks to applied knowledge is power. Boom. Right.
Okay.
Most schools' emergency plans will stay off the road so emergency vehicles can get to the scene unimpeded. Staging areas are usually only available to parents, guardians with ID.
Okay.
Which makes a lot of sense. They would tell you not to go down there, again, because you would be in the way. You would be more of a distraction and a hindrance than helping them do anything. Very informative conversation. Thank you for the service, Mr. Patrick.
It's so interesting because just recently, I think yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, we had another incident at the Capitol where somebody took their car and they rammed it into the barricade, killing a officer, and we're definitely sorry for that family. But they said when the guy comes out of the car, he comes out with a knife, and they shoot him down and these different things, and you're thinking to yourself, are we worrying about knives too? It's like, okay, right now
vehicles and
prep for the active shooter. You didn't say nothing about a knife, like what? Is it every day something new? Now we're preparing for the grenade, like it just doesn't stop. What should an individual do?
That was a tragic incident. I can almost guarantee that those officers, those Capitol officers, were made aware of that vehicle at a distance. And remember I talked about the onion: protect the property, protect the parking lot, protect the building, protect the assets, protect the image. So thankfully they had barricades at a distance from the Capitol protecting the property. Right. And unfortunately he challenged the property, the barricades, and fortunately the threat was stopped. So the goal is to mitigate the damage. You're not necessarily always going to be able to stop these because you might not have that type of intelligence, but you can mitigate the damage. And they mitigated the damage because he could not breach the barricade, the bollard, the barricade that was there, and those two officers challenged him. It's not necessarily the weapon, because the most dangerous weapon can be someone's mind. And he had the desire, he had the ability, and he had the want to. He wanted to do it, and he had the opportunity in his mind. When we talk about a criminal's mind, it's desire, ability, and opportunity, and he put all three of those together and went forward. But thankfully, those brave officers put their lives on the line, and one of them unfortunately lost their lives, and they had to stop the threat. But that just goes to show you how resilient those two officers were. And I don't know the details. I don't think they released the details as to how the other one that's alive, how he was injured and or how the life was lost of that particular Capitol officer, whether he was hit by a car or stabbed.
Yeah, they didn't put the details out, but I do want to mention this comment here at the end here. It says more knife attacks than firearm attacks. I don't know the statistics on that before I say yes or no, but with that being said, I do know that you can kill more with a firearm. And I think about, and when the person, and I can't see who the user was, but when that statement came up, it made me think about Pulse Nightclub. I know here in Florida, I don't live too far from that area and on Orange Ave, and so many people lost their lives. I've actually went to that club before, like, wow, like this is someplace I've actually been here before. And I think about the testimonials of those victims, and they said, I run into it was a young girl, she was turned 18, she ran into the bathroom, and she used the body to protect herself. But the crazy guy ends up reshooting the same area, he was just on this rampage. And it's just like, wow, is this the world that we're living in, where it's just a constant thing? I mean, at that time frame when Pulse Nightclub incident took place, we definitely talked about it more. We grieved more. People donated blood. They have a memorial now, in that area. But now, like I said, at this very current 2021, it's like you hear about it. Oh, 8 people died. Oh, we're so sorry. Okay, on to the next thing. This is our new norm. You really feel that way?
And to your caller or person that wrote, the challenge with it, guns, you don't have to get up close with the knife for the most part, or machete or sharp object. You have to be in close proximity. With the weapon, you could be several miles away and take people out, like the DC sniper. So yes, a weapon is a weapon, and the weapon is as dangerous as the individual willing to use it and the training of the individual. So whether it's a knife or a firearm, it's still going to be dangerous if the individual has desire, ability, and opportunity, and the skill set to use it. But that Pulse incident, that was just unbelievably tragic, tragic. But we keep thinking about now, we have to pay very close attention to the fact that violence in America, or mass violence in America, has been going on since the early 1900s. Like, you take East St. Louis massacre in 1917, almost 700 people killed. The Arkansas massacre in 1919, almost 850 some odd deaths. And then you have the Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street, 1921, right? You have about well over 300 people killed. Then you have the Rosewood massacre in 1923, about 100.
You better preach. You better get them dates right.
What I'm saying is, we talk about now because we have access to information. We have access to the internet. But violence in this country has been going on for a long time. And that's a segue into mental health. We need to deal with ACEs. ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACEs, is basically the landmark study that was done in the late 1990s by the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, and Kaiser Permanente. It talks about the challenges that a young person faces from the age of 0 to before their 18th birthday. And they have a quiz, and you can just go online and type in, take the ACEs quiz. And depending upon where you are on that, without a buffer, without help, without counseling, without love and affection from those that age, you will have more challenges when you get older, like addiction to sex, addiction to drugs, addiction to violence, addiction to alcohol, depression, obesity, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's. So you not necessarily all of those, but you can be exposed to some of those. And it doesn't matter if you have a 1 or a 10. It matters how that challenge is affecting you, how that adverse experience is affecting you. We need to understand the effects of trauma. So
And
when
this is why, I'm sorry, but this is why it's so important for all the systems to work together, because you're talking about risk and protective factors for children. You're talking about early childhood brain development, positive youth development, trauma informed. You're speaking a language that we are still not connecting. You stated it earlier, and I wanted to circle back around really quick. It was off of Liz's questions in regards to the kids. And you had stated knowing the personality of your kids, even though you may have 2 or 3. So then to me, I hear, well, if more people took parenting education, and parenting education, not to say you're not a good parent, it's so you have that language. What you're speaking about is a child's temperament, the different temperament in your children versus the parent and how you interact with one another. So then if you were able to take that and then bring it across another system on even how to train when it comes to prevention work, bringing in advocates, crime victims to be on the scene, post, after it happens, having those support systems and resources available. Again, even though we don't always know when these situations are going to occur, but like why we're here, being prepared for how to deal with the aftermath, especially when dealing with our kids, is very important. We really need to start collaborating across we have counselors out there that are not specifically trained in these specialty areas. So sometimes they are doing more damage than good. Just
Exactly.
because you are a psychologist doesn't mean that you are trained in mass shootings or trained in rape crisis advocacy support work. So again, if you don't know what you're doing, you could be harming people long term as well too. So I
100%,
really appreciate you coming on and speaking past the drop and fight or flight. I mean, you're really getting into the details of community work and what a holistic environment for all of us looks like. Sorry, I went on a tangent.
No,
No,
that's awesome.
It
You're
was a
right.
good tangent.
no.
Remember that there are 3 types of ACEs: abuse, which is physical, emotional, or sexual; neglect, which is physical or emotional; and then household dysfunction, which is mental illness, incarcerated parent, substance abuse, divorce, or mother being treated violently. All of those things can truly traumatize a child if there's no buffer and if those challenges aren't addressed. Imagine a child seeing one of their guardians being arrested or being sexually abused or not or having to worry about COVID-19 all the time. If my nana gets the COVID, because that's what a lot of kids say, I'm going to lose my guard. Where am I going to live? So I don't have enough to eat. I don't have enough clothing to wear. When I was a school resource officer, it broke my heart to see the number of kids coming to school without a jacket during the cold winter days. And it's not necessarily freezing like it is up north, but it's cold enough to need a jacket. And if you don't have access to one, and then you see the bravado, I call it the rooster stance, right? The kid, when you approach them and you say, hey, can I speak to you for a second? Are you in need of a jacket? Nah, man, what do you think? I'm a snitch? What are you talking about? I'm just asking if you need a jacket.
You shivering, bro. You cold. You look cold.
Come on now.
So when you talk about building a resilient community, helping parents, like we have to take. I do a lot of reading, and I read a lot about ACEs, and I'm part of this thing called the Creating a Resilient Community. It's a network, and it's I guess the mothership is Orlando Health and Child Advocacy Groups. And I'll be going to some training April 20th and April 21st. And it's fantastic. So it'll be a 2-day training, a 2-day seminar on ACEs and dealing with things like that. But I was reading an article and it says resilience refers to the process of adapting and overcoming in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, and or significant sources of stress. So when you talk about how do we build resilience in reference to parents, because sometimes parents, and children become active aggressors as well, or active shooters. Right? Children that are marginalized become that. So parents have a habit of, and this is all parents, not because they're bad, they have a habit of trying to raise the child that they want instead of the child that they have.
You better go ahead and preach. Now, here's the thing, and
not because they're bad.
we need a lot of police officers to think like you. We need a lot of police officers to think. Hear what I'm saying? Okay, wait. But let's just put the comments real quick. Oh, brother. Okay.
I hate her.
Sorry. Those are mass casualty events. The knife is the domestic violence weapon of choice, I guess, referring to the different ones that you were saying, you know, the Tulsa and those mass shootings. And there's a question here. There are some questioning. There was some questioning about if police should have entered quicker in the Pulse shooting. Will police always run in, or do they sometimes wait?
It depends on the totality of it. For example, if an individual is inside of a bathroom or inside of a room, inside of a building, and he or she is not actively taking lives at that time, that's a barricaded gunman. So you hurry up and wait because you tried to talk that person and preserve their life as well as everyone else's life. When the individual is actively engaged in attempting to or taking lives, that's an active shooter or a mass shooter, and then you go in and you stop the threat. So without going into too much detail, because there's still lots of litigation pertaining to that incident, went from an active shooter to barricaded gunman to active shooter to barricaded gunman to you get what I'm saying? There were many different stages in that. And
doesn't the police officer need to know, like, I guess in that situation, how would you truly know if you're out, like, you know, if you're outside, if a person's barricaded in? You know,
you can tell by the information that you received from the victims running out and the officers that were clandestinely in close proximity to the door or talking to people as they were trying to help them navigate their way out. And also, go ahead.
No, I remember that night they didn't know if there was more than one shooter. I remember there was a lot of, is there more than one shooter? Is there, you know, multiple shooters?
A lot of dynamics.
Yeah.
There's always going to be, as there should be, people that critique it, but I can tell you the officers that were there, and I probably know over 99% of them were did the best of their ability and were truly heroes that night.
Well, I want to say this just to put it out there, and I always say it, you know, when we're talking about any subject, you know, a lot of times we're easy to look and judge, because, you know, it's quick. We want to blame, like, what the heck? Like, I know there was a police officer standing right outside. How come he didn't come in there? I would have did it like this, did like that. And the average person would never did a damn thing. Probably just call the police and ran. You would
cried, hid, blacked out.
Exactly. But let's go to the next comment. Again, you're discussing mass casualty events that are actually planned. No one is discussing domestic violence incidents that lead to mass casualty, and those are generally not always events with a knife wielding attacker.
Right. So when you look at that, and that caller is right. We're just having a general conversation, but the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence will tell you that 1 in 3 women have the possibility or likelihood of being victims of some form of domestic violence. 1 in 4 women will be the victim of severe physical violence, and 1 in 7 women will be stalked. So yes. And the Everytown for Gun Safety will tell you that over 51%, actually it's about 54% of the mass shootings that take place, 53 to 54% of them pertain to domestic violence. So yes, that is true.
Yeah, that is actually true.
Thank you. Just piggybacking on that real quick, you know, we were talking about how to talk to the kids about mass shootings and everything else. There are a lot of women that'll stay in a situation where there's domestic violence for whatever their reasons are. We know the statistics on that. They leave, they come back, they leave, they come back, something like 10 times before they finally leave, if they ever able to make it out. If you are a woman in that situation and you're at the beginning of that cycle, at a minimum, speak to your kids. At a minimum, tell them to lock their door and go in their room. Try to keep them away from the event. And I know most of anybody that's a mom that's been through that, the instinct, of course, is to protect your kid. You know what I mean? But just, just woman to woman here, right? If you have kids and you're not ready to leave just yet, at least talk to them about going in the closet or getting under the bed or whatever it is that they need to do, or even them leaving the house. Because I think Mr. Kirkpatrick mentioned leave. So tell the kids, you know what, run to the neighbor real quick. If you see anything weird happening, you know what I mean? Run to the neighbor, run to the auntie, run to grandma, run out of the apartment, the house, whatever, and look for help. Would you agree with that, Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Yes. And to go right back to ACEs, remember, I talked about the 3 types of ACEs: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, abuse toward a woman. So depending upon the buffers and depending upon the level at which you were traumatized as a child, right, you are developing or not developing cognitive ability to think rationally. So when we ask why is a woman or why is someone staying in this traumatizing relationship, you cannot achieve what you cannot conceive. If you were never taught love of self, love and self-value, then you're not going to be able to rationalize like that.
Right, but the real question is not why she's not leaving, is what, again, we keep forgetting, why did they keep abusing? Let's, just the domestic.
Right.
I don't.
That's the other question.
And just I'm a trained counselor in the state of Florida. And with that being said, we can have stories after stories, and of course we could dig and we could pull back those layers, of why do we have the situations that we have, and this would trigger this, and this is what triggered that. Just to piggyback off of what Liz was saying, if you're going to say, hey, run to the neighbor's house, also have a to-go bag, so that you can have the important ID cards and birth certificates, because you definitely need that. And having a burner phone, doesn't have to be on, but those phones can always call 911, just to put that out there for someone's safety if they're listening or know someone in those situations. But going back to the, and I wanted to steer it back only because of the subject. I'm a survivor. Right. I could go on for days, and girl, so no, we want to go back to it. Gun violence since the pandemic in New York City had increased 150%, while knife attacks have increased 280% in New York. Let me ask you this question about that comment here. And do you think there's a reason why the news is not talking about that per se? Because, we always hear the mass shootings, but we're not hearing, is it just too much? Like, okay, every day someone's getting attacked by a knife or whatever.
Probably a combination of all of that. I mean, you would probably overwhelm and traumatize your viewers. And there's so many other things that they're talking about. And they really only have 15, not even 30 seconds segments. So they have to, and it doesn't justify it. I'm just saying, and I'm not going to refute what that caller or texter is saying. It's probably right, but you can hide a knife a lot, or have access to a knife easier than you can have access to a firearm. But any type of weapon in the wrong hands is a bad weapon. Whether it doesn't, you can't just credit someone for getting, you can't victim discount because someone was stabbed or shot. It's still horrible if you're receiving that.
Right. Yeah. Again, I mean, even there, if you think about it, if we go back and look at, when we were protesting, they were using cars to run over the protesters. That is another form of mass destruction. It didn't involve a shooting. It didn't involve a knife, but it's something that we see is picking up more and more, where people are using.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Ty, because of course we're in this time frame where there's a lot of issues, dealing with a lot of civil issues out there. So if a person's planning to say, hey, I wanted to go down to the local protest or whatever, and hear my voice, imagine somebody bringing a weapon down there too. That's an easy target, just to say, spraying somebody or whatever the case may be. So you definitely want to be able, I know when I do go to protests and different things, I'm always on the outside. I never want to be, because it's not even that, stampedes and just different things. I know you may say, hey, it could be save the whales, whatever you're talking about.
Definitely. I'm sorry.
we got the police officer here. We don't want to go about what we really talking about. I can't have him tee up. I'm like, oh. I go to the Save the Whale protest. You know what I'm saying? Stand on the outside, just making sure that they don't, we're not getting.
You want to know what I think? What it is again, and to the point of today's conversation is, you're still aware. You still have that mindset of, okay, I see the crowd is getting bigger. Let me move a little bit more on the outside of the crowd instead of staying in the middle, making sure that whoever I came with, I know where they are. We've already picked out very specific safe places in case something happened, because we are preparing ourselves for things that we normally would not prepare ourselves for. Prepare for what you think you would never go through, right?
100% agree. We also have to pay attention to energy. Energy is everything. And we're just so educated that we're ignorant. So what happens is, where you meet someone for the first time and you say that person has great energy, and or you meet them for the first time and you say this person is really creepy. You can even sometimes read a message from someone and say, these people want to have an argument. So pay attention to that. If you choose to go to a protest, it's your right, as long as they don't turn into violence and everything is cool. But when and if you feel something is going wrong, get out of there.
Yeah, because that's definitely a area where it's so many people. You don't know what can happen. It could be something where a horse gets agitated, and then tramples somebody. You just don't want to be in that middle portion, and we have to be prepared. My last question for you, sir, and I strategically always do things, just because I just want to hear it, I'm very intentional in what I do, and it's the last question for me. Do you feel, because of course you have been in law enforcement for so long, do you feel that, because we had an episode about gun control, and it's a touchy subject for a lot of people, because on one end, you have the right to, defend yourself, but at the same time, though, there are individuals who, I just bought my bazooka, yesterday, they don't want a simple handgun for their house. They want they want to blow up a block. Do you feel but do you feel that there should be more gun control in reference to civilians? Because of course, law enforcement and military is a little different, but just in the civilian hands, we're all.
I don't ever concern myself with gun control. I think gun responsibility. I think if that's the term I like, I think just like with a car, I don't think you should be given a car and not have to pass a test every 5 years. I don't think you should be give or have access to a firearm and not have to pass a test every 5 years. I think that if we make people more responsible gun owners, and I also think that there should be psychological exams given to people every 5 to 10 years. So I'm an advocate.
Should we wait that long? Should we wait that long?
No, but I'm just throwing out
an archetype.
He's being intentional. Come on,
because there's never gonna be an agreement on that. You have the left or the blue team, the red team, whatever team they're on, which these
I'm on Team Life.
But I should think that people should be responsible owners of weapons. Even if it's you should be responsible. And I think that a lot of people are irresponsible.
Yeah.
They're irresponsible. So I'm an advocate of responsible ownership of firearms.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Liz, do you have anything to say?
Thank you so much. It was so much knowledge. I can see myself going back. I'm going to rewatch with the notepad. I have so many things I want to write down, research, look into. This was amazing. Thank you so much for your time. Truly.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You are educated. You are so well versed, way beyond the first layer of the onion. Again, you dug deep
Thank you.
You really, I'm going to keep using, you really peeled back that onion and went through the layers. And I so respect that. And thank you for that, because again, we forget outside of the actual physical violence and what's going on in that situation, that there are still long-term effects that people have to deal with. And you really dug into that. I would love to have you back. You were like the best.
All you gotta do is ask. You need to have a show on adverse childhood experiences. That's
Yes. Yes.
Generational trauma is real.
Yes.
Generational trauma is real.
It is. And I want to say thank you once again. Thank you everyone for listening. I hope once again, Specs, you feel better. But KP, thank you for coming on the show. I honestly want to say, you know, my son is now a part of military police. So he's a part of law enforcement.
Awesome.
So, and then also for me being in the domestic violence counselor and these things, you know, he's like, man, we need police officers. Oh my God, my God, my God. But with that being said, you know, I think that police officers should have a balance. They need a rotation. Sometimes they can kind of be desensitized to their environment, and they go through stressors too, but we're all human. And at the end of the day, I really, really honor and appreciate what you've been saying, because it's like, wow, we can have officers like you with those mindsets, you know, of seeing and taking that time to learn that background, you know, and it'd be such a great thing. But I also want to put out to the audience, I'm from New York, Liz is from New York, KP is from New York, Ty lives in New York currently.
Hey.
All some crazy folks.
No.
If you know that they over there doing some crazy stuff, don't be afraid to have a counselor talk to them, because I'm telling you what, don't be afraid. A lot of times you're like, oh, is that crazy? That's crazy Leroy. No, he's crazy. He needs some help, because we don't want any.
Watch your neighbors, watch the kids, watch what's going out on social media. If you again, like he said from the beginning, if you're watching people and watching their habits change, do you see a neighbor that's all of a sudden like spending too much time in the garage now with the door closed? Are they stockpiling ammunition, rifles, whatever? Because just to quickly go back to the Vegas shooting, that guy started stockpiling and buying all types of weapons in mass amounts. And then he literally wheeled them in. Pay attention. You don't have to be a snitch, but you could drop a jewel and plant a seed. There's a difference. Okay.
I think the terminology has to go away in reference to snitching. You know, there's a thing dry snitching. You know, I think dry snitching is like, oh, you know, Pam took that cookie from the cookie jar, and you're like, well, wait a second. What? I'm sorry, Mom, for saying your name, but I'm just. It
makes sense. Like, it just makes sense.
I'm taking cookies from the cookie jar. I'm just saying.
I'm expecting to see a shoe come flying. Come flying and go.
But just in general, you know, it happens. You know, where people just say arbitrarily things like, well, what does that have any purpose? But when it comes to saving a life, you know, oh my God, have a sense of humanity. I know, being from New York, I have been in situations where you are pleading for help and those average people are just looking away, you know, Asian attacks happening. And there were security guards who just basically, you know, looked away. I'm sorry, I looked at the comment here and it says, it's the truth, Pam does take the cookie from I don't know who that comment is, but I believe that's my brother.
I already. We love you guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you like what we do. Support the team. Thank you.
Bye.
We cannot pray in love and live in hate, so that we're worshiping God. God bless.
Amen.